Let's make that hand applause bigger, please, for AFHK. Thank you very much. Let me also congratulate the graduates now. You are now fully graduated. So you can choose where to put that degree, whether you put it on the wall in the sitting room, whether you put it on your forehead as a phylactery, day of the Pharisees, so that everybody knows you have one. Or you can put it in your heart and hands to serve people with it. Or you can put it on the car. In other words, you can display it. So whatever you choose to put it, God be with you and bless you so much. Otherwise, we share the joy together with you. Thank you for the hard work. This very juncture, please, we have lunch for you. Kindly. There's enough lunch, enough food. It's a buffet style. So please, we request you not to be, spare some time and share that meal with us. And then we have a very, very special local music group you don't want to miss. They will sing, they know the Eastern tradition or Western South. They will do the Kinyarwanda, they will do the Lukbara, they will do, they are good at it. Just name it. They're going to do it. So please, I want to be having them present after the next item, which is ideally more or less the last. And this is, with too much humility, I'm really privileged and honored to introduce the next item on our program. You've been hearing a man who is the founder of Pdn. Pdn is Pastors Discipleship Network. He's the CEO and he's the president of this organization. You heard our guest speaker make mention of how he was here a few years ago, one building on the campus, and then all of a sudden, there's a lot going on everywhere. This all courtesy of his hard work, his passion, and his heart for the pastors in Africa. I've worked with him personally, and I know what I'm talking about. So it's my pleasure, please, if you want to join me, put hands together. Let's invite Dr. Richmond Wandera to come over and address this audience. Thank you, sir.
I was seeing some spraying going on. Is it going to... It is finished. All government observers, it is finished here, as you can see. Let me begin by saying a special congratulations to you, our graduates. Congratulations, congratulations, congratulations. This is a very historic day. It's not just historic for our land as Africa, but it's historic for the world and for the kingdom as well. When you think about it from the perspective of the fact that over 70% of pastors in our land have no theological training. This is historic. It's historic because it brings hope to pastors like that. It is historic because, as mentioned earlier, many churches that we consider churches in our land are categorized as churches that are leading people that are a mile wide and an inch deep. And when you think about what God is pouring in our land by giving us these graduates, this is historic. It's historic because the cults that are mushrooming will finally be put to a stop. This is historic. It's also historic because many of the times that have changed over the years, particularly this COVID season, when many pastors don't know whether they're pastors anymore, because over 8 months they have lost their church space, their church premises. They can no longer pay the rent, and they're now walking around without churches. And they're also wondering, how do you pastor a church in the midst of a global pandemic? But answers are now presented to our land. This is historic. And so congratulations to you, our graduates, today. I'd like in a very special way to recognize everyone who is here today, beginning with members of the class of 2020 and 2021, Cohort 4 and Cohort 5. A special congratulations to you. I'm very moved this morning to recognize in a special way Dr. Kigas, the provost of Lancaster Bible College, the faculty, and everybody else who would have loved to be here, but is not at the moment in this place because of one reason or another. Let's appreciate Lancaster Bible College and Capital Seminary for their partnership that has brought us to this place. In representation of this amazing school, we have Professor Robert Blanks here and Dr. Esther Zimmerman. Thank you so much for representing this great school. I'm also very honored to recognize in a very special way my good friend and leader, Peter Kasirivu, who has come here. You heard his words, and we're really honored that you would come. I also want to acknowledge in a special way the country director of Compassion International, an amazing partner to this ministry, but also a man that has led with great leadership and humility. Thank you so much for modeling such a vision, not just for children, but also how the church can be part of articulating a theology of children. I also want to acknowledge in a special way my chairman of the board, Joseph Musalo, and all the board leaders that are here. Some are indeed graduating today. A very special welcome. I also want to acknowledge in a special way all the distinguished guests in your different capacities. Thank you so much for honoring our invitation. I also want in a very different way to acknowledge the presence of my mother. I want to say, would you stand up? Stand up and just wave to us. Some of you have not seen her. She's there all the way at the back. As part of my reflections, I'll talk a little bit about potential, and I will bring her up here for us to engage. I also want to, in a special way, thank all our cherished family members, without whose support we would not be here today. So graduates, let's clap for those family members who are here with us today. And the friends, I know that when Victoria was up here, she didn't just mention family members, she also mentioned names of friends who were part of connecting her to this program that has brought her to where she is today. And so we want to welcome you also, our friends. I thank you for joining us on this very special day to celebrate LBC and Capital's 4th commencement, but also the 5th commencement in Uganda. It is my great honor to warmly welcome all of you to this auspicious occasion. It is also my great joy to thank pastors and leaders who took on the challenge when God brought it before you, and you are here today. But let me first begin by reflecting on the words I heard from a pastor who is uneducated and wanted to join the program but could not join the program. His name is Pastor Mikros Nsiwamusi. Mikros came to me and said, Pastor Richmond, when you look at me, I hope you don't see one man standing before you. Because behind me is over 400 families. Over 400 families that come to my church. And anything that happens to my mind and anything that happens to my walk with Christ immediately impacts these 400 families. And he said to me that I wish there was a program that touches us who've not had a chance to go to school. Well, as he was talking, I began smiling. And he thought I wasn't concerned for where he's at. But the reason I was smiling is because I was thinking about the graduates. I was thinking about you. I was thinking about the mandate that now falls on your shoulders to come alongside people like Pastor Mikros Nsiwamusi and say, it is well. I speak your language and we can talk. We can go deep together. I can teach you what I've learned. Multiplication, good stewardship. And I think this paints a picture of what I believe is going to happen to our land. When we talk about hope, hope does not just come all of a sudden. But hope can be seen from horizon. When you see one person, like an Ezra, rising up in a community, you know that there is hope for that community. So now, those of you who do not know this, there's over 5 countries represented here. And these 5 countries, Newton comes from Kenya. And we are so honored to have at least 2 or 3 graduates coming from Kenya. We had some that came from Rwanda. Everyone from Rwanda, we want to acknowledge you. Those who came from Burundi, we want to acknowledge you. Those who came from Sudan that are part of our cohort. Those that came all the way from Zimbabwe. Yes, Zimbabwe, where are you? Thank you so much for coming. And each one of you that represents, if I didn't mention your country, please. Sorry? DRC, Congo. There we go. There we go. Help me. Which other country did I miss out? Yes, you can stand up and wave. Let us see representation and hope going to Kinshasa in Congo. If I missed your country, please do forgive me. But we want to welcome you in a very special way. Congratulations to each and every one of you Today we celebrate your outstanding accomplishment. Seeing the scholarly rigor that is required for this program, and many of you will attest, some of you as guests, you had this sip through some of the testimonies. People are talking about waking up really early in the morning to make sure that they get onto their assignments. People working hard in the midst of their jobs and their families and other responsibilities to make sure that their work is done. And with the support of their fellow cohorts, we stand here to congratulate each one of you who has demonstrated your commitment and your fortitude, and demonstrated also the remarkable mental fortitude that is required for this program. You did not just demonstrate intelligence, but you also demonstrated grit, the ability to hold on, to grip onto something, and to insist on it until it succumbs. This degree has finally succumbed. And it has succumbed in such a way that now launches you and propels you forward. Graduates, during your time at LBC Capital, our faculty and staff have dedicated themselves to nurturing that potential that is in each of you. And many among you have demonstrated that you have received this support and walked with it and run with it to the point that you are now sitting here today as fully conferred students. I want to reflect with you on this idea of potential. And before I do, let me mention that two women have played a great role in not just bringing me to where I am today, but allowing many of these movements to happen. The first one being, I mentioned to you, my mother, who is sitting at the back. I don't know a person more prayerful in this country than that woman. She nurtured us in such a way that every time it was 8 p.m., it was time for the family to pray. It doesn't matter how long your day had been, whether you had a stomach ache, it doesn't matter. You had to be on that altar for prayer. But something struck me very uniquely. Because when prayer was done at 9 or 9:30 p.m., depending on how long she went or how long we went, at about 10 or 11 after dinner, and those of you who are from different cultures, sometimes we eat dinner really late here. We're talking 9 or 10 p.m. But about 11 p.m., as you walked past her room going to our different rooms, and my room was just a little bit from hers. And we had just had prayer. And I could hear her whispering sometimes my name. And I said, what did I do? And she's not whispering that to any other person. She's whispering that to the Lord. So she could go sometimes up to 11 and 12 and 1 and 2. A time came when I actually brought a word from the Lord saying, if you pray too much and you don't have enough sleep, you'll fall sick. And I did not know how to process that, because if she goes too long without sleep, we know what happens. And I thought I was bringing a messenger from the Lord, and she looked at me and I kept quiet because I knew that the more she prayed, the more we progressed. So mothers, all the mothers here and all the women here, thank you so much. We salute you and we honor you. The other woman I would like to recognize is my wife, Rosette Wandera, who it was cringing in her own soul to be here today, but she was unable because of health. And so this morning she said, be sure to bring my greetings to the graduates and my congratulations. So please receive them. And as I continue to reflect on potential and the hands that live to potential, I can't help but recognize my pastor from the time I was only a little boy, who showed me the way of the Lord and said, walk faithfully. And that man also happens to sit among our graduates today, Bishop Peter Mugabe. We acknowledge you and we thank you. One of the funny stories that I'd like to share is what it feels like to teach your pastor. I ran very fast, I married late, and I got my PhD in philosophy of leadership. And so that qualified me as an instructor in many respects. But then to look at his paper and to decide what the grade is, he's here today. And so we congratulate him. Thank you. It was in 1990 when my father was killed in cold blood while my mother was watching. And I and 6 of my siblings were immediately sent down the road from a home that we had in Kololo next to the airstrip. And we were forced finally, after several months, into the slum of Naguru. The massive shift in our lifestyle and in our lives led my mother into a life of constant poor health, because the environment that we now lived in was very different from what we lived in before. But then for me as an individual, a child who was in primary at the time, I was in primary school and going to a school called East Kololo Primary School. I was very excited about my future because my father, as a lawyer, was able to pay my way and take care of us as a family. And when he was killed, it's amazing how everything changed. That potential that was mushrooming and rising up immediately got a massive hurdle. Long story short, we ended up in Naguru, and by the time I was only a few years into my primary, I had suffered, I had gotten sick from malaria more times than I could count. I had dropped out of school, and now I had begun walking alongside the streets, going to Nakawa market every day, hoping to find something to eat. And I can tell you that those days of difficulty felt like something was choking on the inside of me. And that's why I honor our brother Lenny Mugisha, who is here today, because he leads probably one of the most forthright ministries in our land that is rescuing potential of young children. And it was this ministry that my mother approached and said, we're suffering and we need help. And so I got plugged into Compassion. But I want to tell you one thing that happened, that during Compassion, I did not realize that the person who put up their hand actually to sponsor me was, listen, a 15-year-old girl. A 15-year-old. And when she said yes, immediately the life that was taking one trajectory took a different turn. And all of a sudden, a few years later, there I was, making a decision under the ministry of the man that's before you here to follow Christ. And the Lord would take that many, many years later to allow me to earn a bachelor's degree in accounting, to proceed to do my CPA, and after teaching accounting at Uganda Christian University and Makerere University Business School for a while, and God began to impress upon a man that is here the calling to pull me out from where I was into the pastorate. And I knew that my vision at the time was to make as much money as I could in business in order to support ministries. But then he identified that inside of me there was something that was shepherd-like, something that would shepherd people, lay my life down for the sake of them who were wanting to know Christ. And as that happened, I began to see different people participate differently in order to nurture the potential that was dying. A few years later, I was at Moody Bible Institute in Chicago, and I was graduating with my master's degree in spiritual formation and discipleship. And there I knew that to whom much is given, much is required. And so I came back and founded in 2009 the Pastors Discipleship Network. And it was there that it began to grow at a speed and a rate that I could only say that God was dealing with something in our nation, had put his hand on this work that was beginning to extend beyond Uganda into South Sudan, into Congo, into Rwanda, and into Kenya. And then, long story short, I began to realize that while pastors were very deep in theology and learning these things about the Bible, there was a massive difference in what we knew and what we actually did. And so we began to develop products on our land that would help us answer this question contextually. And so, realizing that not only theology but leadership was also a problem, I pursued a PhD in philosophy of leadership. And as I pursued that long and hard, it began to morph and shift the way I thought about our land. And I began to think and dream about what this nation would look like if every community had an Ezra. What do I mean by that? In Ezra chapter 7 and verses 10, the Bible says, "For Ezra the man devoted himself to three things: to the study, to the practice, and to the teaching of the law of the Lord in Israel. And the hand of God was mightily upon him." Three things: the study, the practice, and the teaching of the law of the Lord in Israel. And so even in the conceptualization of this master's degree, what was presented to the different boards of trustees was the idea of a dream of Ezras for our communities, Ezras for our people, people who have devoted themselves to study. And this was not only in the Old Testament, but it had further precedence in the New Testament. The idea that in 2 Timothy chapter 2 and verses 15, the calling to study to show yourself approved, a workman who does not need to be ashamed. Study. It's a verb that says study. It's the idea that calls for humility, because if you're not humble, you can't study. Most people who think, I know it all, my experience, my wisdom, my wit, my company, everything I want, I don't need to study. But the time someone bows their knee and says, I'm going to study, that is but a mark of humility. It is but a mark of humility. And so I would like for us to think about that for a moment. And so when I began to engage with these ideas of study to show yourself approved, a workman who does not need to be ashamed, and then also reflecting on the times of Ezra, I began to see that there is a long line of that which was dying on the street, that which was dying in these places of poverty, that several people put up their hands and sought to help. Potential that was dying until someone said, look, I'm going to jump into that battle and I'm going to fight with this voiceless individual and give him a voice one day. Well, I have made it my task and my job to learn about the questions that pastors in our land are asking. I have made it my job and my task to research and understand the terrain of the church in our continent. And this is what I have found. I have found that over 70% of pastors in our nation, Uganda, but also a significantly less number, probably about 63% in Kenya, and then a higher number in Congo, and a higher number in South Sudan. A majority of these pastors have no training. They operate out of guesswork. There's a bishop who walked up to me and said, have you ever desired for God to say something to you? Just say something. Because I've reached a point of burnout, I've reached a point of uncertainty in my work. I have all these pastors who are leading these churches that are coming to me to find direction, but I don't know where to send them. And so I've been praying, I'm saying, God, speak to me. Show me where I must lead these people. And I don't hear his voice much. And so he came to me and said, what should I do for God to speak to me? I want him to say something, even if you're doing a bad job. At least there I have heard from him. And I have that comfort in me knowing that I am not alone. I'm with somebody who is criticizing and helping me walk right. And I began to realize that many of the pastors in our land find themselves in that position where they hope that they're doing what is right. And what causes that hope is they can only hope because they have no knowledge. They have no truth. They have no understanding of whose is the church. You would be shocked in Uganda how many pastors think they own the church. They own the church. There's a man in Nigeria who came to Uganda, planted a church, and the church reached up to about 300 members, but it was in a community where people are not giving. And so he sold the church, the instruments, and the people at 200 million. 200 million. And this is not very strange to us because we have a lot of dialogue of pastors saying, this is my church. What does that demonstrate? A misunderstanding of who the church actually belongs to. But then there is also a misunderstanding of what is the message of the church. We talked of the extreme prosperity gospel that is sweeping over our land. But we also talked of churches that think they're teaching the truth, but they're borderline cults. It's because we don't know who founded the church, what the message is, what the purpose is, and now this is knowledge that has now become given and made available to you. For 2 years, you have been on this rigorous uphill journey of engaging with learning who the church belongs to. What is the church about? What are the challenges of the church? And many of these things about the church. And so here we are looking at graduates who are now at this point being sent into this field and into these societies and communities to do what? To come alongside all these thousands of pastors to say to them, there is hope. It is well. Come, let us talk through this together. I have had a chance to go ahead of you and learn these things. Let us study and do work together. And so this potential among many of these honest pastors, what our pastor Kasiru said earlier on, saying that some of these people are honest. They're teaching what they honestly believe is truth, but they're honestly wrong. They are honestly wrong. And with just the removal of scales from their eyes, it's incredible how their ministries will take off in the direction of truth. So once again, this is a historic day, not because we have now reached the point and we are wearing these gowns. It's historic because of what this means for our nation. Each of us here knows a pastor or leader who's operating at less than their potential. Each of us here can name a name. And if we think and lean in a little bit further, we can also identify why they're operating under their full potential. And then here before us are graduates who now have both the intellectual and spiritual ability to discern these complexities and to engage with them. And so this is hope. When I look, I have hope for our nation. I have hope for Africa. This is the heart of Africa, the nations that have been sounded here today. This is the hope. And I'm hoping that beyond here, we will go and extend our training to the other parts of Africa and to the rest of the world. And so I want to take a moment and mention how humility is critical. We kept talking about servant leadership, and we talked about an alternative way of leading. And we saw Mr. Lenny Mugisha here giving each one of you a servant's towel. It will be curious after 1 year when I come visiting or when someone comes visiting to ask where that servant towel is. It will be curious to know where you placed it. Because sometimes the platform and the ostrom and most of these are the podiums that we have and the spotlights, sometimes those begin to move the servant towel that far and farther away. And so I want to share with you that I made it my vision following a conversation I had with Wes Stafford, who was the former president of Compassion. After he met with me in Chicago and asked me a question over a meal. And he asked me, what keeps you awake at night? And I thought, what a strange question. Because God gives sleep to those he loves. What keeps me awake at night? And I said, nothing, but should there be anything? And I remember his face changing and looking at me and saying, don't live like that. Beg God. Beg God to break your heart for that which breaks his heart, and let your heart be so broken that you turn over on your pillow as you think about that need that God is calling you to reflect on. And I want to share with you that that happened and shifted a lot of things for me. And I can tell you that this servant leadership that we talk about, I think for me personally, my journey began after that meal. I went back and got the vision of Pastors Discipleship Network a few months later. And then from there, I made a pledge not before man, but a pledge before God, that humility would be my #1 core value. My #1 core value. I said to God, doesn't matter how high things rise. It doesn't matter how wide things get. If humility can be given to me, I would like more and more and more of it. And then I was reminded later on that humility is one thing you can beg God for, but you can never thank him for. Because the moment you do, it's gone. And so I want to keep begging God to help me on this journey. This being a master's degree, it means it's very select. It means that you have to go through a very stringent selection process to join this master's degree. My mind, as I was sitting over there watching each one receive their degrees, for everyone that walked around, I was trying to compete in my mind if I can match that person to another pastor who could not get in. And do you know what? I succeeded. For every person who entered into this program, there is one person who desired to, but couldn't get in. I can't even tell you the number of applications or people who come in and don't get through. And I began to think that this here is a calling unto stewardship. It's a calling unto stewardship. That which has been invested in you. And those of you who are graduates, you know the amount. I mean, in Ugandan shillings, it would be an obscene amount to talk about what has been invested to one person. And you'd wonder, how can such a huge amount of kingdom resources be invested in just one individual? And one thing that comforts me is that God is not a bad businessman. I have a background in business, so I can tell you that. He's not a bad businessman. But he's the one who keeps his eye on a return on investment. A return on investment. If you're confused about him and business and the mind of God and the theology of business, you only have to read the parable of talents. And you begin to wake up to the idea that actually God keeps record of each one of his investments. And I'm hoping and praying that the Lord who carried you faithfully thus far will then take you forward as a steward of this knowledge that our nation so desperately needs. It's very strange when you look at why God's people and the people of the world perish. When you read Hosea 4:6, God does not accuse the devil for the perishing of his church and his people. He doesn't accuse governments for the perishing of his church and his people. He doesn't accuse demonic forces for the perishing of his church and his people. What God accuses is the people themselves for their lack of knowledge. My people perish for lack of knowledge. My heart begins to beat heavy because I think of the number of pastors today who think they're teaching the truth and yet they are false. The people today who are desiring to be pastors but they have no grounding. In Uganda we see pastoring as the only profession that you enter into without training. And you all, the graduates today, are going to change that. You're going to give people a taste of what it looks like to be grounded, to be sharpened, to sharpen an axe before you use it, rather than going with a blunt axe against a tree and beginning to hammer away. I began to realize, looking at the statistics, that graduates today, you are in the top 3% of educated pastors in our nation. Top 3% of educated pastors in our nation. And so congratulations. But this congratulations comes with a mandate upon you. That will you then choose to multiply yourselves? Would you choose to take that which is a problem in our land and solve it? I think with the problem-solving skills that you have. And let me kind of mention to you with a testimony. So I pastor a church called New Life Church over in Chireka. And the complexity of pastoring this church has been beyond what I thought about before I became a pastor. I did not know what it looks like to pastor a church that is in a heavy Muslim community. I did not know what it looks like to pastor a church that is surrounded by brothels, prostitute houses. If you put a pin at my church and look and go about 2 miles and put a circle, a 2-mile radius around the church that I'm pastoring, you would find over 200 brothels, over 200 prostitute homes in that place. It is the hub of drugs in the whole of Chireka and Weyogere. And engaging with Muslims, engaging with these people who feel their lives are giving up. Those young people who've dropped out of school and they are hating God and hating anyone who tells them about God. The complexities of dealing with that requires not just intelligence, but it requires spirit-led problem-solving abilities. And so this is what you've acquired. And this is the beauty of receiving such a master's degree, not only in a school, but in a school that honors the Lord. This is the beauty that what you have received is now a solution to the complexities of our situation. That's why I believe the professors did not let you off easy. They gave you rigorous, difficult things to engage with. such that you are prepared for the place that you are going to serve. And so I want to share with you about an opportunity that are encouraging, that I hopefully will create that platform that has you be able to give back. Uganda has seen a new day where right now we're dealing with bills such as those that want to close all churches that are pastored by pastors who have no theological training. So we're at that point where these churches are now at risk. And when we think about you and what you have achieved today, our graduates, we can't help but imagine what is going to be used of God to solve this massive problem. So Uganda has about 85,000 pastors. We are knowing that about 70% of them have no credentials from accredited institutes, which means if this bill is passed in our parliament, we're going to see a massive closure of churches, as we saw happening in Rwanda. And so we are at a precipice of a time when Pastors Discipleship Network has already gone to the National Council of Higher Education, requesting to become a non-university degree awarding institution. And because that is our opportunity, we have been honored by the visitation of people from this high esteemed place to come and assess us and our preparedness to become this such school. But one of the questions that we were asked are, make a display of your faculty. Show us people who are able to teach certificate, diploma, and undergraduate classes. And with a smile on my face, I knew which names are going to appear on that list. We are going to pour into these hungry pastors' spouses, these hungry women in leadership, these hungry emerging leaders who are running to Pastors Discipleship Network to study. And thank you already in advance for being willing to be part of the faculty that will be pouring into the upcoming leaders. I see great days ahead of us because we are going with Christ. We are going with Christ. So no matter how uphill the task is, we will make it because we know who holds our hands. I also want to end by saying that if we do this faithfully, we will rescue the potential of many pastors who are currently operating at less than their potential. But for now, I want to say thank you for your commitment. Thank you for your perseverance. Thank you for everything you did to bring you this far. And thank you also, you family and friends, for working with our graduates on this day. Grace and grip was given to you. You had the grace, but you had the grip as well. So congratulations. And so as I've come to the end of my remarks, I'd want to bring hope to everyone who looks at the church and sees that the prosperity gospel has taken over. Everyone who looks at us and says, is there hope for our land? Well, look ahead of you to the people in caps here, and you know that there is hope. There is hope. There is hope. There is hope. And so it is my honor now to ask the graduates, would you please stand? Would you please stand? If your task is on your right, it means you haven't graduated yet. Well, it is now my privilege to ask you to move your tassel to the left, saying congratulations, congratulations, congratulations. May you keep standing. In this same light, I feel impressed upon me. It wasn't part of my plan, but it impressed upon me to pray for you. This is a historic day, Lord. It's historic because our land and our nation needs this day. Zimbabwe needs this day. Congo needs this day. Sudan needs this day. Rwanda needs this day. Kenya needs this day. Tanzania needs this day. Uganda needs this day, oh God. And when we think about the whole of Africa, we realize that this day means something great for our people. There are people who are walking around discouraged by the church and wondering, why is it that every time I go to church, it's mostly that which I don't think is the gospel? But the pastors also are in a place where they do not know what truth is from lies. And the Bible says you will know the truth, and this truth will set you free. For the last 2 years, these your graduates have been wrestling with truth, understanding truth so that they can make truth known. And so we pray in the name of Jesus that your Holy Spirit will come over them heavily, and that they will go forth with you as you guide them every step of the way. Tomorrow is bright because of what you started through the partnership of Lancaster Bible College and Capital Seminary and Pastors Discipleship Network, and many more that have joined this partnership. So to you who is able to keep us from falling and to present us before yourself with great joy, to the only God our Father, be glory, praise, and majesty, both now and forevermore. And all God's people say amen. I'll also invite our guests to please stand there. Those who are ready to play the song Pomp and Circumstance, please get ready yourself.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Our photos, and then they are going to come back here, and then we cut the cake. After cutting the cake,